Hey, we're Grant and Betty of Coffee and a Map. We like hiking and backpacking. It's one of our favorite things to do. And we wanted to do an interview and learn something about trails. So we thought, who better to talk to than someone who has a good understanding and knowledge of trails and how they're built and maintained. Fortunately, he was kind enough to grant us an interview, and the following is what happened.
Hello everybody, we are Grant and Betty with Coffee and a Map. We're here with Stephen Parker. He's the maintenance coordinator for the Ozark Highlands Trail.
Yes.
And we're going to ask him some questions about trail maintenance and just about what trails are about.
Okay.
All right, my first question is, what is the Ozark Highlands Trail?
Well, the Ozark Highlands Trail is one of the national recreation trails. It's located in northern Arkansas. It runs 165 miles from Lake Fort Smith State Park over to the Buffalo River. There it connects with the Buffalo River Trail and continues on along with the Buffalo River Trail for several more miles. There's a gap through the lower Buffalo Wilderness area, and then there's an additional 34 miles built in the Sylamore section of the Ozark National Forest. The plan is to get those gaps filled in and continue the trail on along Lake Norfolk to the Missouri border, where we'll connect with the Ozark Trail there in Missouri, and eventually have the Trans-Ozark Trail that runs all the way up to to St. Louis.
That's so exciting.
And how long would that be altogether?
It would be about 700 miles.
So can you tell me what you do as a maintenance coordinator?
My main job as the maintenance coordinator is to recruit volunteers to go out and maintain trail. Particularly here in the Ozarks, we have a lot of vegetation, and Mother Nature is really good at trying to reclaim trails. So trails require maintenance. One of the benefits we have with the Ozark Highlands Trail is it doesn't get a whole lot of traffic like, say, the Appalachian Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail do. And all of that traffic, all that foot traffic, is really good maintenance. But here, our trail provides a lot of solitude, so we don't have as much traffic, and it requires more active maintenance.
Who does the maintenance?
All of our maintenance is done entirely by volunteers. We have no paid staff at all. We have a program kind of like the Adopt a Highway litter pickups, where people will adopt short sections of trail, anywhere from 1.5, generally about 3 or 4 miles long. We have a couple of sections that are a little over 5 miles long, just because that's the way access works out. So those are a little bit long. But the maintainers, then the adopters, go out and clear the trail a couple of times a year.
Cool.
Of making or maintaining a trail, a lot of people probably picture a bunch of folks out there with chainsaws just chopping down trees and everything. Is that how it works?
That's a very small part of what our maintenance is. Probably 10 to 15% of our maintenance is using a chainsaw to cut out trees that have fallen across the trail. The vast majority of it, and our most popular trail tool, is a pair of loppers, because what we're dealing with is tree branches growing into the trail corridor.
So not a bunny lopper, but whoppers.
Big loppers, 2.5 feet long handles.
I think you handed me some one time and I was like, no,
Not going to do it.
not going to do it. They're too big.
But you put up mile markers.
I did put up mile markers.
Yes, you did.
That was fun. Well, actually, Grant hammered them and I handed them to him. I carried the old ones.
So I think something that a lot of people don't consider or think about is you factor in water drainage when you're building a trail, don't you? How's
You
that?
should.
Yeah, you should.
You don't always, and that's been more of a fairly recent advance that people have recognized the need to do that
For sustainability.
for sustainability purposes. So I mean, there are sections of the Ozark Highlands Trail that are a fall line trail where the drainage runs right down the trail. And over time we'll work to try to alleviate that. But yeah, definitely looking at the way water is going to flow either across or down the trail is something you want to consider to build a trail that is sustainable and doesn't degrade and erode over time. One of the great ways of doing that is called grade dips. And if you've ever hiked on a trail and wondered, why does it keep kind of going up and down like that? That's the reason, is because it forces the water to move at those lower spots across the trail rather than running down the trail.
Huh.
Because we're trying to work with Mother Nature and have the water go across and away from the trail rather than run right down it.
Where do you decide where a trail should go and what route to take? And what is a trail corridor?
Well, a trail corridor consists of the trail tread, which is the ground you walk on, plus 6 to 8 feet in width and about 8 feet tall. You want cleared out of any type of obstructions, because you don't want to be hiking along and having limbs slapping you in the face.
The spider webs are enough.
Yeah, particularly in the summer. Lots of spider webs.
How do you decide where a trail should go?
Well, the primary consideration is where do you want to go? If you want to get from point A to point B, what's the best way to do that? Trails, particularly on Forest Service land, have various standards to which they're built, and there's a wide variety of standards. So for example, the Ozark Highlands Trail is a foot traffic only trail. So there's no equestrian use, and there's no bicycle use on the Ozark Highlands Trail, or ATVs. So trails that incorporate equestrian use or bicycle use or ATV use all have different standards that they have to be designed to, and that can include the width of the trail, the size of the corridor, and the grade, the steepness of the trail.
So those would probably need to be wider than a foot trail, wouldn't they?
Yes.
Are there any kinds of trail specifications or standards that you need to adhere to?
Yes, and again, particularly because we're on a national forest, there are national forest trail standards, and a lot of the other federal agencies, trails on other federal lands follow these same trail standards that have to do with the width of the trail, the width of the corridor, depending on what it's being used for, and trail grades.
So kind of like what we talked about earlier.
Yes. You generally don't want to run a trail straight up a hillside. You have to kind of work in some grades and switchbacks and so forth in order to move up and or down a hill.
So do you know, would trails in state parks or something like that have similar? They might have different standards. But
they may have a different standard, but pretty much all trails that are built by man have some type of standards that they're working, at least any that are going to get used.
Well, speaking of cut switchbacks, and I wanted to ask you what trail braiding was, and why should you not cut switchbacks?
Okay. Well, first let's talk what cutting a switchback is. When a trail comes down a hill, you'll work down and then it'll make a sharp turn back, and that's the switchback. And cutting a switchback is when you don't go all the way along the trail to where it turns, and you just, I'm just going to cut this corner and go down a steep slope. And what happens is that rapidly becomes a point of erosion. and the trail will just start to wash off down the hill. That's why you don't cut switchbacks.
And
Don't.
trail
Don't,
braiding.
guys.
And trail braiding is, you'll particularly see it in areas that may hold water and start to get muddy. And frankly, when you're hiking along and you come across a muddy stretch of trail, the best thing for you to do is just to plow right through it. Walk right through the mud. And what happens is people will, I don't want to walk through that mud, and so they'll get up on, adjacent to it in a little bit higher spot, and they start to cut another little trail through there. And then that turns out to get muddy. And then you go to move over another 2 or 3 feet, and that turns out to get muddy. And you start ending up with all these braided trails.
Or your 2-foot trail becomes 12 foot.
12 foot, yes.
So what about people that ask, because I've often wondered this, if you have a mud puddle and you don't want to truck through it because you don't want to tear up the ground anymore.
It's actually better just to stay in the trail.
In the trail. I've figured, but I always thought, I wonder what. Because you're braiding it otherwise.
Yes.
Or
And it will become just as muddy over time when you
Right.
do that. All you're doing is making the problem bigger.
Bigger.
So
which requires more maintenance.
which requires more maintenance.
Or if there's a tree down. We've seen this several times across the trail, and people sometimes can't go over, under, or through it. You have to. A lot of people go around it, and
You can start seeing.
you see a new trail being formed going around the tree.
Sure you do.
Well-
And sometimes there's no way around that. That's just the nature of the beast. But one of the things that any hiker can do is, most people are hiking with the phone now, and there's all sorts of free apps that will allow you to get the GPS coordinates of where you are, and you don't need cell signal to do it. If you can record the GPS coordinates of that, and if you can take a picture of the obstruction, and then when you get back home or get somewhere where you have cell signal, if you will tell your local trail maintenance organization about that, send them the photograph and the GPS coordinates. I can tell you from personal experience that's very helpful, because we don't know every time a tree falls down in the woods.
You can't hear it.
We don't. And so we rely on the people that are out there with turning in that information to us, so that we know we need to go out and address a situation.
Be the eyes and the ears.
That's right, be the eyes and the ears.
If I'm hiking on the trail and I come across a wooden bridge, natural stone steps, or switchbacks, are they placed randomly, or is there a reason?
They're never placed randomly.
There's
always a reason it's there.
No, all those stones.
The stone steps.
Sometimes they're a pain.
Well,
I guess
look-
everybody's gait is different.
everybody's gait is different, and when you're talking about stones, particularly here in the Ozarks, because that's pretty much all we have.
Yeah.
Some of those rocks are there, they're just there, and the trail is maybe trying to take advantage of them. So they may not have been placed there, but they may also be too big to get out, and so we just have to work around them.
What about the bridges? You just put them there because they look pretty?
No, if there's a bridge, and we try to avoid bridges, if there's a bridge, it's because it's just we need a bridge.
There's some water crossings that have bridges and some that don't.
Most of ours don't. I think there's maybe only 2 bridges on the Ozark Highlands Trail.
I know one's right there off of
Cherry Bend.
Cherry Bend, yeah.
Mhm. And
That's a new one.
Yeah, and then we recently built one over on the Buffalo River Trail at Grinders Ferry.
Oh. All right, so now let's talk about this. What happens if your planned trail comes up to somebody's property or other type of land ownership, and how do you address that?
Well, for the most part, we try to avoid private property. Where we're looking at filling in the gaps over there on the east end and getting to Missouri, we're probably going to be having to deal with some private property. And so what you have to do is see if you can get
And make it a fast one.
a legal agreement with the property owners, called an easement, to cross their property.
So sometimes that's a headache, huh?
It's a big headache. Some people don't want strangers traipsing across their property, or they're worried about liability. But again, for the most part, we try to stick to staying on federal property.
So we have been involved. We are familiar with each other. We've done a couple of
Sure.
maintenance outings. And you told us a story when we were at the Stack Rock reroute about a bush and what all was involved with that. I think that's a neat little thing to hear.
Yeah, and that gets into the whole how do you decide where a trail goes type thing.
Right.
What happened there was a landslide had taken out a section of trail, and so we had to reroute about 1.5 mile section of trail. And the landslide had actually gone all the way up to the base of a bluff, so the ground on the level where the trail was all completely unstable, so we had to reroute the trail on top of the bluff. And again, this was a very many-month process there, because you had to go out in the field and kind of just scout out where's a good place to have the trail be, and then you have 3 or 4 different little iterations of, well, let's move it up here because that's going to be better down here to be here versus here. So there's this constant adjustment to it, and we finally had it pretty much where we wanted. And then again, this is all on National Forest property. There's getting all the permissions from the National Forest, because they've got to do biological assessment, they've got to do a historical assessment, they've got to do archaeological studies.
Really?
To determine that there's not going to be any impact on endangered species or historic sites or anything like that. And we actually had to move the trail a little bit because of a bluff shelter area on that.
So essentially any trail on a national forest property would have to do the same thing.
Got to do all this same stuff. But as we were out there doing this, one of the biologists said, "That's the largest strawberry bush I have ever seen in my life." It's not like an endangered species or anything, but it was just a unique specimen. It was just the very large size of it. And they just asked us, it wasn't, it was kind of an edgy area, so we couldn't move really far away from it. But they said, when you're building the trail, we would like you to just stay as far away from this particular bush as you can, because it's just a remarkable specimen. And so we did.
So we have a series of questions, 5 questions we call the 5. The name may change over time, but it's common questions that we're going to ask everybody.
Okay.
And since you're our first, we'll start with you. First question is, what is, as the Ozark Highlands Trail Maintenance Coordinator, what is the most common misconception that people have about what you do?
The most common misconception. Well, I've got 2. And it's either that we're paid for doing this, or the question we talked about before, that we're out there with chainsaws, just clearing stuff out, that's mostly what we do. We're not paid. If this was a paying gig, I don't know that you could pay me enough to do it. We do it because we love it.
Right. 2, what would you like people to really know or understand about what you do?
That these trails after they're built, require constant maintenance. Mother Nature, again, is really good at trying to reclaim her land.
Even when it's used.
Even when it's used. And it is a constant battle to keep it going. They don't just keep themselves. There's hundreds of volunteers that are donating their time to keep the trails hikeable for you and I.
Number 3, what is the hardest part about what you do as the Ozark Highlands Trail Maintenance Coordinator?
That would be dealing with the heat and humidity, and we pretty much do that by not doing much work during the really hot months. And a close second would be just finding people who are willing to donate some time
To do the maintenance.
to do the maintenance.
Okay, number 4, what is, contrary to what is the hardest, what is the most enjoyable part about what you do?
When we're out there working and we meet people
That are hiking the trail?
that are hiking the trail.
Find out where they're from.
Find out
and
where they're
everything.
from and what they're doing, and you know, in general, they're the greatest people on earth, and
They're having
you know,
a blast.
they're having a good time, and it never fails. They are just very appreciative and say, "Wow, thanks for all you do."
That would be neat.
That would be neat. It is fun meeting other people on the trail anyway.
Yeah, it is.
Kind of get a backstory.
And finally, what is the most important piece of advice that you would give someone before they head out for a long hike or an adventure? Any hike, really.
Yeah.
Even any outdoor
Outdoor
adventure.
adventuring.
And I'm gonna, quote the Leave No Trace Center here. The number one principle: plan ahead and prepare. Find out all you can about where it is you're going, and know what you're doing before you go out there.
So if I was planning to go out there to do the Ozark Highlands Trail, how would I plan and prepare for that?
Well, you might
Wouldn't
start.
go.
Well, this
Not
time of year.
now.
Not this time.
Well, if you went to our website and read our information, you would learn that this is not a good time of year to go. But the Ozark Highlands Trail website, ozarkhighlandstrail.com, is a good place to start. And then Tim Ernst has written the definitive hiking guide to the Ozark Highlands Trail. There should be a new edition of that coming out fairly soon with the new updated mile markers.
Oh,
That you helped us put up.
I did.
You did. You helped us put up all the
Yes.
new mile markers, and we updated the mileage.
There's a couple of really good maps too. The maps are great.
yes.
There's a couple of
We
maps that are
love the
available.
maps.
I like maps too.
That was fun. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
You bet.
Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed our visit with Stephen Parker. Maybe you learned something. I know we did. But as you've seen and heard, trails require a lot of work and maintenance. And it would be great. We would appreciate it if you can get involved, find a local trail or an organization and get involved, helping them keep it clean and maintained. That would be awesome.
And don't forget, trudge through the mud holes.
Again, thanks for watching.
Bye.